In 1907, a young psychiatrist named Carl Jung noticed something bizarre about his patients at the Burghölzli Hospital. The ones who recovered fastest from severe mental illness had one peculiar trait. They spoke in what Jung called pregnant silences, pauses so loaded with meaning that they revealed more than hours of conversation ever could. What Jung discovered that day would later explain why Einstein's greatest breakthroughs happened during his daily walks in complete silence, why the most successful CEOs speak only 12% of the time in board meetings, and why your brain literally rewires itself when you stop talking and start truly listening. By the end of this video, you'll understand the neurological secret that separates intellectual giants from intellectual pretenders. Here's something that will shatter everything you think you know about intelligence. In 1985, researchers at Bell Labs discovered that their most innovative engineers, the ones generating breakthrough patents, had an average verbal footprint of just 16% during collaborative sessions. What will blow your mind is these engineers weren't just staying quiet. Their brain scans showed something extraordinary. During periods of listening, their prefrontal cortex was firing in patterns identical to deep meditation. They had accidentally discovered what Tibetan monks spend decades trying to achieve: the ability to enter a heightened state of consciousness simply by shutting up. Right now, there's an epidemic of what neuroscientist Dr. Daniel Siegel calls conversational narcissism sweeping through every office, every classroom, every social gathering on the planet. People are so addicted to the dopamine hit of speaking that they've literally forgotten how to process information. Stanford's recent study on cognitive overload revealed something terrifying. The average person in a group conversation retains only 8% of the information shared because they're spending 73% of their mental energy preparing what to say next. They're not listening, they're waiting to talk. But what's really disturbing is these same people rate themselves as excellent listeners and highly intelligent communicators. They have no idea they're intellectually drowning in their own verbal diarrhea. Jung's breakthrough came from studying what he called active imagination, the state where the conscious mind stops interfering with deeper cognitive processes. He noticed that his most insightful patients entered this state naturally during conversation, while his least insightful patients seemed allergic to any moment of silence. But Jung went deeper. He discovered that excessive talking triggers what he termed psychological inflation, a defense mechanism where the ego creates a false sense of intellectual superiority to mask deep insecurity about one's actual knowledge. In his private journals, Jung wrote, "The fool speaks because he has to say something. The wise man speaks because he has something to say. But the genius speaks only when silence would be a betrayal of truth." This wasn't just philosophical speculation. Jung was documenting a measurable phenomenon that modern neuroscience would later prove with shocking precision. The 20% rule isn't just some arbitrary number. It's based on a neurological reality discovered by Dr. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA. His team found that when you speak for more than 20% of any conversation, your brain shifts from discovery mode to performance mode. In discovery mode, your anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for detecting new patterns and making novel connections, operates at peak efficiency. But the moment you cross that 20% threshold, your brain switches to performance mode, where the primary goal becomes maintaining consistency with what you've already said, not learning something new. Here's where it gets really fascinating. Dr. Lieberman's scans showed that high IQ individuals naturally self-regulate to stay below this 20% threshold, even when they don't know the rule exists. Their brains have evolved an unconscious mechanism that prioritizes learning over ego gratification. But there's an even deeper layer. Harvard's Dr. Judson Brewer discovered that this 20% threshold corresponds exactly to the point where the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for insight and creativity, becomes suppressed. When you talk too much, you literally shut down your capacity for original thought. The most shocking part? This effect is cumulative. People who consistently exceed the 20% threshold in conversations show measurable decreases in cognitive flexibility over time. They're actually making themselves less intelligent with every word. Let me share some examples that will completely reframe how you understand intellectual power. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, had a secret technique he called purposeful ignorance. In any scientific discussion, he would force himself to ask at least 3 questions for every statement he made. His colleagues at Caltech documented that Feynman spoke roughly 15% of the time in research meetings, but his contributions were so precisely targeted that they often redirected entire fields of study. Feynman deliberately cultivated what he called productive confusion. He trained himself to become comfortable with not understanding things immediately, which allowed his subconscious mind to work on problems while his conscious mind stayed quiet. Warren Buffett takes this even further. His business partner Charlie Munger revealed that Buffett spends 80% of his workday reading and thinking in complete silence. But here's the secret. Buffett has trained himself to enter what psychologists call diffuse mode thinking, a state where the brain makes connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. During Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings, Buffett employs what he calls strategic ignorance. He'll ask questions about industries he's been studying for decades, not because he doesn't know the answers, but because hearing others explain their thinking reveals the quality of their mental models. Steve Jobs discovered something even more profound. His biographer Walter Isaacson revealed that Jobs would conduct silence meetings, 3-hour sessions where team members would sit together without speaking, just thinking about a product challenge. Jobs believed that the first idea anyone spoke was usually the worst idea, and only by pushing through multiple layers of silence could you access truly original thinking. Modern tech giants have weaponized this principle. Google's Project Aristotle found that their highest-performing teams had what they called conversational turn-taking equality, but with a twist. The most successful teams had members who spoke less than 18% of the time individually, but their contributions were so high value that they drove 300% better outcomes than teams with more verbose members. The transformation from talker to strategic listener requires rewiring your brain at the neurological level. Here's the framework that actually works. Phase 1. Neurological awareness. Most people have zero insight into their actual talking patterns, but there's a technique developed by Dr. Sherry Turkle at MIT called conversational forensics. Record 3 conversations this week, but don't just measure time. Analyze the quality of your interventions. Count how many times you ask questions versus make statements. Count how many times you build on others' ideas versus redirecting to your own. Count how many times you pause for 3 seconds before responding. Most people discover they're engaged in what psychologists call competitive monologuing, taking turns giving speeches rather than actually conversing. Phase 2. Strategic question architecture. This isn't just about asking more questions. It's about asking questions that reveal mental models. There are 5 types of high-intelligence questions. Assumption hunting questions. What would have to be true for that to work? Systems thinking questions. How does that connect to what we discussed earlier? Perspective shifting questions. How would someone who disagrees with us see this? Boundary testing questions. When does that principle break down? Metacognitive questions. How confident are you in that assessment? Phase 3. Developing conversational Aikido. This is advanced level stuff. Instead of opposing ideas you disagree with, you learn to redirect conversational energy. You use phrases like, "Help me understand the logic behind that," or "Walk me through your thinking process." This technique, developed by Harvard negotiation experts, allows you to maintain intellectual honesty while gathering maximum information. But here's the secret sauce. You're not just changing what you say, you're rewiring your brain's reward system. Dr. Robert Waldinger's research at Harvard shows that people who master strategic listening experience the same neurochemical rewards as those who talk excessively, but without the cognitive costs. The psychology behind excessive talking goes deeper than most people realize. Dr. Susan Krauss-Whitbourne's research at the University of Massachusetts revealed that compulsive talking is often a form of cognitive avoidance. People use their own voice to drown out uncomfortable thoughts or feelings of intellectual inadequacy. But here's where it gets really dark. Neuroscientist Dr. Antonio Damasio discovered that excessive talking actually changes your brain's structure. The neural pathways responsible for self-reflection begin to atrophy, while the circuits associated with external validation become hyperactive. You literally become addicted to the sound of your own voice.
There's also what Dr. Daniel Kahneman calls the illusion of explanatory depth. When people talk extensively about topics, they convince themselves they understand those topics better than they actually do. The act of verbalizing creates false confidence, which leads to even more talking, creating what psychologists call a stupidity spiral. But strategic silence works differently. Dr. Amos Tversky's research showed that people who speak less than 20% of the time in group settings are consistently rated as more intelligent, more trustworthy, and more influential by their peers. But here's the kicker. These ratings remain consistent, even when observers are told about the 20% threshold. The effect is so powerful, it persists even when people know they might be being manipulated. The reason is evolutionary. Dr. Robin Dunbar's research suggests that in prehistoric human groups, the quietest members were often the ones who had developed superior pattern recognition and threat assessment abilities. Talking too much was literally dangerous. It could attract predators or reveal hunting strategies to competitors. Modern humans still carry these ancient biases. We unconsciously associate strategic silence with wisdom and excessive talking with weakness, even in corporate boardrooms and university seminars. The most common objection I hear is, "But I'm paid for my expertise. I need to demonstrate my knowledge." Here's what you're missing. True expertise isn't about showing people what you know. It's about using what you know to help others discover what they need to learn. When you ask expert-level questions, you're actually demonstrating far deeper knowledge than when you recite facts. Dr. K. Anders Ericsson's research on expertise shows that true experts spend most of their time identifying the boundaries of their knowledge, not reciting what they already know. When you ask sophisticated questions, you're advertising your ability to navigate complex intellectual terrain. "But won't people think I don't know anything?" This fear reveals the fundamental misunderstanding about how intelligence is perceived. Dr. Heidi Grant's research at Columbia shows that people who ask high-quality questions are rated as more competent than people who provide high-quality answers. The human brain is wired to respect curiosity more than certainty.
What if I'm in a situation where I need to establish credibility quickly? This is where strategic silence becomes a power move. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on influence shows that asking one penetrating question that reveals deep understanding of a topic establishes more credibility than delivering a 5-minute explanation of your qualifications. For the next 21 days, the minimum time required to create new neural pathways, implement what I call the Genius Protocol. Day 1 through 7, track your conversation ratios and identify your talking triggers. Day 8 through 14, Practice strategic questioning using the 5-question framework. Day 15 through 21. Master conversational Aikido and develop comfortable silence. But here's the real challenge. Notice how your relationships change. Watch how people start seeking your input more frequently. Observe how your own thinking becomes clearer when you're not constantly translating thoughts into words. The smartest people in history understood that intelligence isn't about broadcasting what you know. It's about constantly expanding what you're capable of knowing. Next week, I'm revealing something that will disturb you. Jung's secret research on what he called conversational vampires. People who use strategic silence not to learn, but to psychologically manipulate and control others. This is the dark side of everything I just taught you. I'll show you how to recognize when someone is using these techniques against you, and how to protect yourself from people who have weaponized strategic listening for manipulation rather than genuine understanding. Subscribe if you want to learn how to spot it, and how to use it ethically, because once you understand the true power of strategic silence, you'll realize that not everyone who's quiet is wise, and not everyone who's learning is doing it for the right reason.